All right, my friends, in this video, I want to talk about some of the most common kettlebell juggling injuries or knocks that occur that can be very annoying and frustrating as we start our juggling journey, what they are, what we can do about them, and why they happen in the first place, so you can prevent those knocks traveling forwards. Now, what we're going to do is basically travel down the body, starting with the hands, because the hands get knocked up probably the most, in my opinion. And then we're going to look at literally going down through the shoulders, the legs, the shins, and the feet, and what we can do to prevent these knocks. So let's get started with the hands. So a lot of times we end up knocking our hands, primarily the fingers, both on the fingertips as well as the knuckles of the kettlebell. And there's a few reasons why this occurs more often than not as we're learning to juggle. So as we start to juggle, something that becomes very important is learning how to keep an open hand when it comes to catching the kettlebell. And it seems simple enough, yet we don't pay much attention to it. Whenever we're doing a flip, no matter what it is, I can either be in a very receptive open position with my hand, meaning my fingers are flexed open and back, or I can be like this, wanting to catch the kettlebell. And this position to catch is very common. For example, with our simple flip, a lot of people will angle their hand like this and then catch like this. And you'll see very quickly that if my hand's already slightly closed because I'm anticipating that catch, I can get knocked either in the fingertips or I can close prematurely and then knock my knuckles like so. And that hurts. So a very simple fix, yet very important fix, as well as a very important piece for catching more consistently, is opening up the hand and allowing the bell handle to make contact first on the palm and then receive it and catch. You can think about the catch in two phases. There's contact and then there's the grab. I don't want to go right to the grab because if I just miss it by a second, all of a sudden that window's closed and I hit my knuckles. You also have less of a chance to catch it because you only have one chance to grab it. Instead, we can flip, make contact first, and then close. And this is true for all of our flips. Instead of keeping a closed hand, which happens a lot with all of our flips. For example, we'll look at the helicopter, and in all my previous videos of explaining all of the 5 basic flips, I outlined this very clearly. And I mentioned that we want to be very receptive and open instead of ready to catch it prematurely close. For example, with the helicopter flip, which looks like this, one common thing I see is that people are already like this as that handle is coming around. If you just look at the surface area of what's making the catch, this is going to be a lot easier to initiate contact than this. And so, if I'm like this and I'm already closing my hand, chances are I can hit my fingertips or I can hit my knuckles. And so being open is very important. As another example with our mug flip, I can try and catch the handle like this, or I can try and catch it like this. If I try and catch it with my fingers forwards, then obviously as that handle comes around, it can hit my fingertips, or I can close my hands too early and it'll hit my fingers here. Both suck. We want to prevent both as much as possible. So we say nice and open. You'll hear that slap happen first, and then I close my hand. So keeping a wide open hand is important. This is true for all flips. Let's look at something more advanced as an example, and two movements just for another example. One, our simple mill. So our mill, like this, I'm releasing and I'm catching here. If I try and close my hand down here, then very often or not, I can get smacked in my fingers or my knuckles. So keeping a wide open hand, making contact first, and then closing is going to be your best bet. Now something more advanced, for example, this lateral over the shoulder oblique flip to behind the back catch. Likewise, you won't be able to see it as clearly, but as I make contact behind my back, my hands are as wide open as possible. Contact, then grab, instead of already trying to be in a closed position. A lot of this is unconscious, and just bringing it to your awareness is going to help a lot and save those fingertips. So think about getting nice and wide open, and don't rush to grab the bell. Last thing I see that commonly makes contact and knocks the fingers and hands specifically is going to be a late response to catching, or in other words, a large gap between the release and catch. Let's take the simple again for example. If I'm doing my simple flip, and you see how I'm reaching, my hand is basically staying down here. I'm releasing the handle, and then I'm having to snipe forward and catch it. I'll show you that again. As opposed to, now look at how my catching hand is exactly where it needs to be before I release the handle. And the time between release and catch is super short. What this allows is a lot better chance to be able to catch the handle, because if I'm starting from down here and I flip and I'm having to snipe out, or if I'm catching with the same hand, flip and I wait back here and go and catch out, that movement forwards into the handle can cause a lot of damage to the hand. And so instead of release and my hand's already there, catch, I'll show you the difference between those two. Release and catch. See how my hand is already open and close to the ball instead of sniping forward. That movement forward is going to hurt. We never want to meet force with force when we juggle. So as soon as we're going towards a handle that's coming towards us, it's just going to hurt. So instead, we want to stay open and receptive and minimize that gap between release and catch. Other common reasons why your hands get hit a lot of it can just be trying to do something too complicated, too quick. For example, the tap flip is a common one people would like to learn. But when you haven't learned to dial in that simple flip, which is the initial flip we use, and we're throwing from out here and that bell is coming towards us, or we're whipping it back towards us, or we're spinning too fast or too slow, oftentimes we're going to hit ourselves in the hand. So simply taking your time going through the progressions is really important, not taking on too much too soon. You need time to adapt yourself to the complexity of kettlebell juggling and the skills that slowly advance. If we jump too quick into a complicated movement, our nervous system and our awareness hasn't caught up with the subtle sensitivities and awarenesses and nuances we need to be nice and safe. So when it comes to safety, which is what this video is about, more or less, evolving slowly allows your body time to navigate the potential injuries or risks that happen. Also, informing yourself, like this video is presented for, is very important as well. Let's go ahead and move on from the hands into the shoulders. And the reason why I like to look at the shoulders is because a lot of times that's how the weight can really tug. As we're catching these large flips, there's a lot of tug that can happen on the shoulders. One of the movements in particular, so if we're going up here, for example, there can be a lot of pull on the shoulder, as well as going behind the back. There can be a lot of tug and work on the shoulders. Usually it's my shoulders that take the most strain when I do juggle, and it's what I'm usually most worried about and take a lot of precautions around. Not in hitting them, just in the strain that can potentially be caused when we aren't focused and when we don't have good technique and form. Firstly, warming up the shoulders is important. I like to do different band exercises such as behind my back, work on some overhead stability with the kettlebell here, just moving around, as well as integrating my snatches just so I can warm up the shoulder. 3D movements are also very important. So as presented in my course, Moving 3D, I coach and teach very specifically these 3D patterns that help us navigate space and navigate moving the bell into this top fixation position with more precision and nuanced technique. And so simply just warming up the shoulders through these patterns will help translate over to a warm and adaptable shoulder, as well as your shoulders. Your shoulder understands the movement patterns that are required for movements like the simple mill. Now, one thing that in the last year I've really implemented that's made a huge difference in my coordination, strength, stability, as well as safety of my shoulders is the WEC method, coiling core method. Coiling core method, from what I understand, I have not been certified in this method by David Weck, but I do hope to be in the near future to understand the nuances. I've just learned from various coaches and watching. Coiling core is about connecting to our rotational patterns as well as our lat and our obliques, both of which really help support and stabilize the shoulder. I dislocated this shoulder 3 times last year. First was in jiu-jitsu, second was in soccer, and it just sort of kept going after that. And when I finally learned how to really connect to my lat, my shoulder felt less isolated, as in when I moved, there's almost this phantom effect of not really being connected to my shoulder, not really feeling that relationship with my shoulder. And so I would go unconscious sometimes and do a big movement and my shoulder would pop out because I wasn't aware of it. Now, connecting with the core, and if you aren't familiar with coiling core, look it up. Landmine University also teaches brilliant coiling core exercises. It's about shortening one side and lengthening the other side. And when I started doing this to really connect and engage that lat, all of a sudden my shoulder felt more supported, and I was aware of it because I was aware of all those other things that were supporting that strong shoulder position. When it comes to movements like our mills in particular, knowing how to engage and move and take this traction that happens, not just with the shoulder here, but actually connected to the lat and therefore the core, will really help save your shoulder. So coiling core, look it up, has been huge for me for protecting my shoulder. One other thing, for the shoulders is, and the arms, is preventing jerk. So sometimes as we move, we get that. We get a little jerk that happens. Now, oftentimes this is just an error in placement of the catch. It can also be using not enough tension throughout the arm. So if my arm's too relaxed and then suddenly that bell pulls me down, it can jerk me downwards. But most importantly, one thing I get across to a lot of my students is the importance of riding these arcs. So anytime we're juggling along these circles. If we're doing a swing in front of us, there's a circle. If we're doing a move laterally, there is a circle. Whenever there is a straight drop, that's when we'll get tugged. And so if, for example, this is a common one, I do this exercise, which is an oblique mill, transition. I'm releasing it on one side of the body, creating this rainbow. So when I catch it here, I can ride out along an arc. Now what happens if instead of releasing and catching it here, I release and I catch it here, all of a sudden now there's a drop downwards and you'll see the difference. So again, the initial one, nice, you can see and almost feel that circular action happening. Now, if I come here, you see how it just drops and it tugs me down. And I therefore don't have these circles to be able to ride out nice and smooth. So that creates tug in the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder. So if all of our movements, including behind the back, catching behind the back, another key tip for this one too, along a similar line, if I'm releasing it to catch behind the back, so I have my crossbody simple release and catch, I want to catch it as far out as possible. So therefore, I can ride out nice and smooth. If I release it into me, so I release the bell and I'm having to catch it here, all of a sudden there's a drop and I don't have the circle to bring me out of it nice and smooth. If I catch here, I can ride out. If I catch here, there's the drop all of a sudden and then I'm forced to have that jerk. So simply thinking about staying nice and long, be as long in your movement as possible, meaning find the end range of the circumference that is created by the path of the bell and ride along the outside of it. As soon as we deviate inwards, then we get all these tugs. I hope that makes sense. What's next? We've looked at the shoulders, we've looked a little bit at the arms now. Staying nice and long is going to help all of your arms and shoulders. As soon as we start tensing up too quick and we start stifling those arcs and circles, we can get a lot of wear and tear on the joints as well. So again, stay nice and long instead of short and rigid. Let's go ahead and move on to the legs. So, common things that happen with the legs are shin hits. Why do we hit our shins or our legs or our knees? The most common cause for hitting our knees or legs is a lack of discerning our planes of movement. And I'll explain this. This is really important. As I start to cast out, in particular with lateral movements, most often we are only hitting our shins and knees, moving laterally. You probably know what I mean if you've juggled a bit. We don't often hit our knees when we are doing flips in front of the body or even our figure eights in front. We're more aware of our knees traveling forwards and backwards. However, when it comes to the sides, the most common cause of injury or hitting yourself is we have this lateral plane right here in front of the body. Let's pretend it's about a foot right here and it travels across the body right here. The most common cause for hitting your knees and legs is doing that, is casting or starting our movements in front of us slightly or behind us. And I'll give you a really simple example. This is a movement I teach in my Moving 3D course. In that course, I outline very clearly this exact concept, and I get you to really understand and execute working diligently in these planes and knowing the difference. All right, so I'll show you from this direction right here. Hopefully I'm side on. So if I have a movement like my side body cast, I'm just going to do a side body outside cast, inside rack. You'll notice if you watch the movement of the bell that I'm traveling very laterally. So I'm not going forwards or backwards. I'll explain this more, but just get a visual. So the bell is traveling directly to the side, in which case is giving me a clear path in front of the body. Now what happens if instead of starting casting directly to the side, I'll show you from this side a few times first. So I'm casting directly to the side. What happens if I cast too far in front of me? Then all of a sudden that bell is coming towards me. If I cast in front of me slightly, that bell is going to come towards me. Now if it's a light enough weight, you might be able to muscle it, but as soon as it gets heavier or you start doing larger movements, you're going to be pinned under that weight. You're not going to be able to navigate it away from your knee, so you're going to hit yourself. So once again, instead of going directly to the side, I cast slightly in front. All of a sudden that bell's coming towards my knee. Now what happens, this knee right now. Now what happens if instead of casting to the side, I over rotate and I cast too far behind me? I can hit my back knee. You see? So, and that's just the difference between a couple inches, between casting to the side and casting too far in front or casting too far behind. So when it comes to lateral movements, keep your movements lateral. If, for example, I'm doing an under the leg, you'll see how I release and catch in a position that allows me to come directly across the body without any path going towards my knees. Now what happens if I cast too far behind me to start? Now that bell, if I cast behind me and I release, that bell's traveling in front of me. So when I catch it, inevitably, it's coming back towards my body. Now what happens if I cast too far in front of me? All of a sudden now, my leg's in the way because I cast in front of me, I'm releasing behind me, and now again I'm off axis to this lateral plane. This is true with every movement. If I'm doing a mill, very important, because now that bell's so much heavier because it's in the air, I am needing to really be careful with staying in this lateral window right here. If I cast behind me, therefore come in front of me to release, and then I'm going to have to catch back here, I'm coming towards myself. Likewise, if I want to start my mill and I cast in front of me slightly, I come towards the back of my body here, therefore I release it and I have to catch in front of me again. The bell's coming towards my knee. And so it's very important to get accustomed with that lateral plane. Pretend there is a wall behind you and a wall a foot in front of you, or a glass wall, actually, even better. And so if I'm moving between that corridor, in that corridor, that's how we want to orientate our lateral movements. And I don't want to mix that frontal plane movement with sagittal plane movement. I want to be able to discern those planes. Incredibly important for avoiding almost all of our leg injuries or knocks. That is the biggest point for avoiding the legs, the knees, the shins. More often than not, it's not being intentional with our releases. Going directly to the side, and in my upcoming juggling course, which I have started to create, I outline this very clearly. And I make sure that you understand how to move side to side before you start to juggle. That's why we learn our 3D movements first. In an ideal world, we learn our 3D movements first. We get accustomed with moving side to side, going through our pattern, so when it comes time to juggling, we are secure and safe in these planes. Because the reality is most people have just not learned how to move side to side. They move forward and backwards very well because that's how everyone freaking moves. That's what the conventional fitness industry prioritizes, are these sagittal plane movements forwards and backwards without a lot of deviation side to side. When we move side to side with the bell, we also inevitably need rotation as well. So we're not only moving in this frontal plane, we are also moving in the transverse plane and mixing those two together, which also in the conventional fitness industry is not prioritized. Feet. Let's look at feet before we wrap up. Why do people... Well, first off, it's a misconception that people, the most common thing to be worried about is dropping the bell on your foot. In my experience coaching many students, as well as my own experience juggling, it's not my feet that I'm most concerned about. There's actually, there's other things that I would be more worried about, such as my knees and shins, and my shoulder strain, and my fingertips. The most common reason why people hit their feet is not actually from dropping the bell on their foot, although on occasion that does happen, and I'll show you why. I'll tell you why. It's actually from being lazy, because that bell hits the ground and rolls into your foot and you decided not to move. That is the most common reason why you're going to hit your foot. Quick feet or happy feet, as I think Pavel said, in particular applies to juggling. So as you're juggling, if you drop the bell, stay active on your feet. Don't just frickin' stand there. If I drop it, be quick. As soon as and you get really good at this over time, you understand the moment where you slip up in a catch. As soon as that happens, we're just nice and active on our feet. In particular with movements such as the oblique flip, which has a higher chance of the handle landing on the ground like this, where the handle lands vertically on the ground. Those can be some of the most unpredictable bounces. Some tips. Juggling on sand or grass or something softer is going to be the best bet, because there's going to be less unpredictability in that bell bouncing all over the place. So that's tip number one, is just juggle in a good environment. Hard surfaces, the bell is going to bounce more, a little more unpredictable. Also, something that becomes very important is, well, moving your feet. So become accustomed to, as you drop the bell, even if you're practicing a movement and you have an awareness of how that bell is going to drop, just stay on your feet. Think about the athleticism and the agility you need in any sport to react. I played a lot of soccer growing up. The moving backwards and being able to move as a defender with an attacker coming at you, you just have to be light on your toes and very adaptable, because he might go any which direction. The same is true for boxing and all sorts of sports. So think about being on your toes. As we drop the bell, we're moving around. Environment, quick on your toes, move your damn feet. The reason why the bell would drop on your foot, and in my 3 years of juggling, I have dropped the bell directly on my foot once. And that was because I was feeling lazy that day, my attention wasn't on, and I was doing a mill. It was with an 8 kg, it didn't actually hurt, it was just like a, wow, I just got lucky too. I was releasing the bell, and as I catch it, instead of focusing on the catch, I immediately started thinking about my next movement. So I released, and I was like, oh, I got that catch. I'm gonna think about what's next. I caught the bell, but I caught it too low. So what happened was that bell slipped out of my fingers. So I caught, the bell came down, it slipped out of my fingers, therefore was going downwards and hit my foot. Recently I saw Ryan do this too on Instagram, where he was doing a rainbow like this. I believe it was something like this. And likewise with him, he grabbed it, but then that bell slipped out of his fingers and went into his foot. So some key things to prevent this. First off, focus, focus, focus. Juggling inherently has risks. You're gonna have to be focused and attentive to what you're doing prior to starting, or else we have room in our awareness to slip up and hurt ourselves. So taking a deep breath, focusing your intention into juggling, getting present even with your environment around you, and making sure that your focus on your practice is important. Secondly, chalk is great. Chalk can be the difference between a slip out of your fingers or that little extra grip that helps you secure that bell. So that's fantastic, that's important. And then also, like my mill, focusing on one movement at a time. And so the reason why I dropped that bell is that I released it. I was like, okay, well, I know how to catch this. So my mind immediately started thinking about the next movement, which I believe was another mill, or it could be anything. And so as soon as I switched my attention from the present task to the future, I had less awareness of what was happening, and then I slipped up. So that was on me, and highly preventable. All injuries can be prevented when it comes to juggling, and this is what's gonna lead us to our wrapping up, is that it is so important to progress slowly when it comes to juggling. With all injuries and knocks, the primary reason why this happens is taking on too much too soon. We are juggling cannonballs. We are juggling solid weights thrown around that can do damage, not only to ourselves, but other people and our environment as well. So not taking on too much too soon is important to be able to build our awareness as we build our skills, instead of trying to jump skills and not allow our awareness to catch up. And our awareness is what allows us to become sensitive to when we slip up. I'm highly aware of when I, in a millisecond, know that I've misplaced a catch. I know as soon, even if it's right here, and I catch and it slips out of my hand here, I know the feeling of that bell slipping out of my hand, and therefore I can react in that millisecond to move away. Really cool. This is something I've talked about with other jugglers, something that gets developed out of necessity. Now, if I take on too much too soon, I have not built up that awareness and sensitivity to those nuances, so that's when you can get injured, because you're not sure how to you're not sure how to steer clear of danger, because you haven't built up your danger awareness. The head, Don't take on too much too soon. If the mill feels dangerous to you, there's other movements that you need to learn first. One movement that everyone wants to learn is the wolf flip. Yes, you could hit your head, but not if you are building slowly and progressively looking at that movement. And so, talk to me, talk to other people who are good at juggling, who can clearly do these things, not just out of luck, but consistently do them. Because we know the progressive steps into achieving them. With that wolf flip, there are a lot of things that I would teach before going into that release overhead. I don't think you need a helmet, because if you do that movement right, that bell's not actually traveling towards your head. Watch again real slow. As I release it, you're going to see it actually comes up over my shoulder. My head's actually out of the way. Or it stays high enough for me to be able to evade. Now, the most people, that would be like, well, man, you could easily just slip up and hit your head from that. I've never hit my head in the 3 years that I've done wolf flips, which is that movement right there, which is a crazy flip. And not one I would recommend for your first year, probably juggling, because your awareness hasn't caught up. But to someone like me or other people, we are aware of the inches of space between our head or our knees or other parts of the body. I'm going to wrap it up with that. Most importantly, don't chew more than you can. I can't remember that saying. Don't take on too much too soon. Evolve with your skills naturally and allow yourself to build slowly. Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative. This is a longer video, very important video for learning how to juggle. It's getting loud behind me, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you for watching.